Good morning. It's Saturday, April 13th, 2019. A 3-hour Washington Journal is ahead for you today. We begin with the controversial Pentagon policy change regarding transgendered troops. The new policy, which critics have derided as a ban on transgender service members, went into effect yesterday. This morning, we want to know what you think about the change. If you support it, the phone number this morning, 202-748-8000. If you oppose it, the phone number is 202-748-8001. We've also set aside a special line this morning for active and retired members of the military to share your thoughts. That number, 202-748-8002. You can also catch up with us on social media. On Twitter, it's at CSPANWJ. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/CSPAN. And a very good Saturday morning, too. You can start calling in now. As you're calling in, we'll walk you through that new policy change from the Pentagon. As of today, no one with gender dysphoria or who has transitioned from their birth gender will be allowed to enlist in the military. Current service members who have transitioned or began transitioning as of April 12th, that's yesterday, will be allowed to stay in the service. Current service members diagnosed with gender dysphoria from today forward will have to serve in their birth gender, and the new policy allows service secretaries to waive that policy on a case-by-case basis. Ahead of the implementation of this new policy, the House held a vote late last month to condemn what the Pentagon had put out and what the Trump administration had approved of. It was sponsored by Congressman Joseph Kennedy of Massachusetts, a Democrat. Here's his comments from the floor of the House that morning.
Because that is the very foundation for this policy. Targeted discrimination against transgender Americans. Supporters will say otherwise. It's about unit cohesion, they say. Except for the fact that the 5 chiefs of staff for the military branches have testified that they're aware of exactly 0 instances of a transgender service member negatively impacting discipline or morale. It will degrade our military, they say. Except that 56 retired generals and flag officers told us that it is the ban that would degrade readiness, quote, even more than the failed don't ask, don't tell policy did. It's science, they say. Except that the Department of Defense relied on data nearly half a century old and ignored plenty of other studies. Just ask the American Medical Association, the American Psychology Association, the American Psychiatric Association. It's about cost, they say. Except that the military spends 10 times more annually on erectile dysfunction medication than we have on trans-related care in the last 3 years combined. It's not a ban, they say. Ask
Gentleman's
anyone
time has
of
expired.
the brave transgender service members or veterans.
I yield the gentleman an additional 1 minute.
In the gallery today to ask exactly what this ban means. Mr. Speaker, in a country that celebrates freedom, this policy tells our service members that they do not have the freedom to be who they are. Where is the freedom in that?
That resolution hit the floor back on March 28th. It passed by a vote of 238 to 185 on a mostly party line vote. Some 5 Republicans ended up joining Democrats in passing that resolution. One Republican who was leading the opposition to it, Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler, a member of the House Armed Services Committee. This is her comments from that morning.
DoD's military accession standards state individuals must be free of medical conditions or physical defects that may require excessive time lost from duty for necessary treatment or hospitalization. Our all-voluntary military is the greatest military force in the world, and we must allow it to make the best medical and military judgment about what medical conditions should qualify or disqualify an individual from serving. We should not carve out exceptions for an entire population. Military service is a privilege, not a right. That is why Secretary Mattis reviewed and issued a new policy on transgender service and the medical condition of gender dysphoria. The policy is not a ban, and it allows transgender service members to serve in their biological sex. The Mattis policy does not kick anyone out of the military for being transgender, nor does it give preferential treatment to transgender persons. All persons, unless grandfathered or granted a waiver, must serve in their birth gender. It is a fair policy, allowing transgender individuals to serve openly as long as they're willing to serve in their biological sex and they can meet the medical behavioral standards.
We're talking about that new transgender troop policy. Went into effect yesterday. Phone lines again this morning if you want to join the conversation. If you support it, the number's 202-748-8000. If you oppose it, 202-748-8001. And we set aside a special line for current active and retired members of the military. That number, 202-748-8002. Some numbers on transgender care in the military. This from the Associated Press. An estimated 14,700 troops on active duty and in the reserves identify as transgender, though not all seek treatment. $8 million was spent on transgender care in the military since 2016. The total annual health care budget for the entire military exceeds some $50 billion. Again, those stats from the Associated Press. More from the debate surrounding this new policy as it's gone into effect throughout our first hour of our program this morning. But we mostly want to hear from you, whether you support it, you oppose it. If you're a member of the military, we want to hear especially from you this morning. We'll start on that line for those who oppose this new policy. Richard, Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. Good morning.
Good morning, John. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yes. I was watching the clip before. My congressman is Patrick Kennedy here in the city of Newton, Massachusetts, and I'm a Democrat as well. And when President Obama put into effect through then Defense Secretary Ash Carter to allow transgender to transgender gentlemen and women to serve in the military, I was quite pleased. This was a reflection of a change in times for the better, where people can be who they are and be patriotic. Americans serve and die for our country, the country that they love. And for this Mr. Trump, and after getting rid, by the way, there was mention in the lead up to my call this morning, John, to now former Secretary of Defense Mattis, General Mattis. I don't believe he was in favor of the initial proposal to undo the Obama rule to allow transgenders to serve, and then of course he left under the whole. I don't want to get into the whole Syria issue. That's why he left. Point being,
Richard, the final version of this proposal came out while Mattis was still as Defense Secretary. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, right, yes. And all I was just going to say, John, on that matter, and that point was, in my view, in my humble opinion up here in New England, is that this speaks to social issues, cultural issues, and and the news media and my own views, etc., would say that this is unprecedented. However, as a culturally liberal person myself, this is a matter of civil rights and equality and tolerance and pluralism, foundations in our Constitution. That being said, whether or not we have someone at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue who tweets ridiculously and changes his mind and is bizarre, I'm sorry to use that ad hominem epithet, if you will. However, it is to the point that this is someone who, look at his Supreme Court appointments. This is, and I believe, John, if I'm not mistaken, the Supreme Court actually upheld it at one point since Kavanaugh's been on the court. So I'm strongly opposed to this, and I would hope that our military should be open, just as I believe it was Truman who desegregated the military in the late 40s. We need to follow in that tradition of America moving forward for all of our citizens. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Richard, we'll walk through a little bit more of the timeline on this in just a couple minutes. I want to hear from a few more calls, though. Raymond, Memphis, Tennessee, on that line for those who support this change. Go ahead. Raymond, you with us?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, I support it mainly because of the fear factor of the military, people that have to deal with someone who is different. I understand the freedom that we should be having in this country, but it could mean life and death on a battlefield and I feel that we need to talk this issue out more before we continue onward. I do feel that we have a very unhinged president of this country, and something has to be done about him. But I don't know if I'd feel safe. I don't understand that particular part of their decision. I'm also a Christian, and I feel that I'm not sure the Bible supports it. My change may happen later, but I need to listen to what all you folks have to say.
Raymond, before you go, why don't you think you'd feel safe serving with a transgender member of the military?
It's the way they make a decision. If you have to fight on the field, I don't know if they would fear being in battle because of their change. I don't know. I don't understand the transgender type of attitude and so I just feel I can't support it at this time. I mean, I oppose it.
That's Raymond in Tennessee. Let's go to that line for those members of the military, active and retired. Chester in Mansfield, Ohio. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm as former military and that I have knowingly served with some gays and people that believe in the transgender lifestyle. I mean, for me personally, that doesn't matter. And as far as a comment, as far as the gentleman ahead of them being brave, they are. They're like everybody else. They're in there to serve their country, and they follow orders and they make the decisions that they're told to make.
Chester, to the comment from the previous caller that decision making could mean life and death on the battlefield, and saying I don't know about their decision making. What would you say to that?
Basically, I say that everybody I've been around, all soldiers, were trained to follow orders, and 99% of them of soldiers follow orders. I had men that served under me. I had nobody tell me because of their preference of sex that I can't do that because I'm afraid of it. No, it doesn't work. I mean, I knew guys that were in the 82nd, and they had no fear of jumping out of that airplane.
Chester, thanks for the call from Ohio this morning. We'll stay on that line for active and retired members of the military. Ted's next. Good morning. Your thoughts, sir?
Hey, good morning there. I just want to say that this generation, I'm a highly decorated non-commissioned officer of the U.S. Air Force, active duty in the 80s and 90s, and I found that as long as a person is up to standard, it makes no difference what band they're dancing to. I find that the people that I've listened to this morning that never spent one day in a uniform, that have got anything to say about this issue, don't thank me for my service. Don't look at people that are up to standard, but they're not dancing to the band that you like. Change the record. Change your record, not theirs. I just find it shocking and appalling that people that never served have got something to say. That's shocking to me. Right now, I've got a nice young friend of mine. He's 20 years old, and he's down at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri right now in Army basic training. And he's wrote me letters, and he tells me about the things that he's doing. It's no different than what I went through 35 years ago. No different. So I just tell people that if you've never served, then just shut up. Thank you.
It's Ted in Oregon. This is Catherine, Cleves, Ohio, on that line for those who support this new policy change. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm not really sure I support it, but I know that I don't oppose it. Here's my standard. If you're going to counsel people that are transgender and homosexual? Are you also going to counsel the whoremonger, the adulterer, maybe the rapist, maybe the person who watches or looks at pornography? Because the Bible says that all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. So if we're only going to counsel transgender and homosexuals, then what about the other 99% of the people who live outside of the protection of God?
So Catherine,
from a Christian perspective, all have sinned.
Why make that? Why equate those things, homosexuality and rapists? You put those back to back.
Because sin is sin. If the military is going to call out homosexuals as a sinner and as transgender as a sinner, and you're going to counsel them, then why not also counsel the drunkard? Or how about like the reprobate that sits at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue? He is a whoremonger. He said, I don't know a porn star. I didn't have sex with a porn star. I didn't pay a porn star. And you could ask my attorney, Mr. Cohen. Well, we know he knew her. He screwed her. He paid her. And now his attorney is going to prison. So if we're going to start holding people accountable, let's start with the big guy. Let's start with the reprobate that sits at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I don't have a problem with calling out sinners because all have sinned. But if you're only going to do it to one class of people, you're wrong, because even Jesus didn't do that. And that is my saying for today. Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
That's Catherine in Ohio this morning. On this issue of this transgender troop policy, the House Armed Service Committee back in February of this year held a hearing. They invited active members of the military, transgender troops, to come and testify about this new policy, what it would mean for them. This is Captain Jennifer Pierce at that hearing back in February.
The two lowest points in my career were both when there was no clear policy in place. The first when I was with the 7th Infantry Division as their intelligence planner. The Chief of Staff, Fulbright Colonel, called me into his office and said, because he didn't know what to do with me and he wasn't sure what the right answer was, he didn't want me in the male bathroom and he didn't want me in the female bathroom, so he instructed me to walk a block or two down the road where there was construction, and I was allowed to use the porta potties out there for the construction workers for a period of months while, as a division intelligence officer, I felt like that was not taking care of your soldiers. The second was when I was on leave. I was actually enjoying a little bit of a vacation when I woke up to the tweets from the President of the United States, and I think it was in that moment that I, for the first time, really questioned, why am I still waking up and putting on this uniform when time and time again I am told that I'm not able to serve? Why should I wait around to deploy and risk my life again when the people that I am serving do not even want me here?
The tweets that Captain Peace there referred to came from the president in July of 2017. Here's a few of them. The president announcing his change when it comes to transgendered military service. After consultation with my generals and military experts, please be advised, the president said, that the United States government will not accept or allow transgendered individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened with the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgender in the military would entail. Thank you. That was the president, July of 2017. Fred's a active or retired member of the military, Huntsville, Alabama. Go ahead.
Yes. Hey, hi, man. How's it going? I tell you, I'm glad I'm retired. I retired about 17 years ago. I couldn't handle it. Nope. As a drill sergeant, I had so much to train soldiers on, and I had to keep everybody up, and that's another thing we'd have to deal with. We'd have to have extra time for training on it while going through school. Drill sergeants would have to. That's another issue that would come up, and I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I'd get out if I had to deal with that. So I don't know what's happening to our military. Our military is going down. It's going to go down. I say stop it. Stop it, please.
And when you say stop it, Fred, what do you mean? Stop what?
Stop trying to change things. Trying to change. We have the strongest military in the world. We train soldiers on what they need to train them on. We discipline them. We get them to be standard to be above standard, and this would just be another wrinkle in the whole ordeal.
So, Fred, on our Facebook page, Keith writes in. I want you to respond to this, Fred. Keith says that this change has nothing to do with military readiness, that these people have served honorably for years now. Keith says this is about hate. What do you think, Fred?
I think it's about duty and country. It's what it's all about. It's just another wrinkle. When people start divulging what they are, if they are that, that's fine. I'm sure I served with some great transgender people, but we didn't know. We didn't need to know, and that was fine. But if you start putting people in there and they start saying what they are and acting the way they are, that's gonna screw up our whole military system.
So, Fred, you think the don't ask, don't tell policy was the right policy?
Yes, that's the way to go. Don't ask, don't tell, and don't act in that manner. That's the way it should be.
That's Fred in Alabama this morning. A few more Facebook comments and tweets. Lauren writes in this morning, if the operation has been done, then there is no reason to not allow a transgendered person in the service. The government should not be paying for the operation, though. Edward saying this policy is about time. The military isn't supposed to be a social experiment or a place to go to get free sex change operations. And Edward writes in on Facebook, it's disgusting. It reminds me when blacks were first forced to serve separately. They weren't dignified as the whites, just seen as and treated as lesser than until that was outlawed. Where is all of Congress on this? Why should we distinguish between those who are killed by roadside bombs in Iraq and Afghanistan for freedom? It's shameful, is what Edward writes this morning. We want to hear from you on phone lines for those who support this change, for those who oppose it, and that special line for those active and retired members of the military. We'll put those numbers up on the screen for you as we hear from Fred. Bakersfield, California supports the new policy. Go ahead.
Yes, I do.
Why is that, Fred?
If you start something, it's going to get rougher in the end. And I heard the lady talking about Christianity, about what's going on in the military, but what you don't know is this right here, that the Antichrist is going to be a homosexual also. So he's just getting the soldiers ready for when he get here.
It's Fred in California. This is Sally, Edwardsville, Illinois. That line for those who oppose this change. Go ahead.
Hi, I was recently reading about Casimir Pulaski, who's a Revolutionary War hero, saved George Washington's bacon, father of the American cavalry. He was an intersex person.
Sally, was this that Wall Street Journal story from last week?
I think I read it in the Washington Post, or I don't remember.
Go ahead. I think I read the same story. Go ahead.
Well, they exhumed his skeleton, and it was the skeleton of a woman. And they did a DNA test, and it was confirmed that it was Pulaski. So he was outwardly a man, but had female characteristics, and this just happens, in a number of ways. And so, okay, we're going to kick Casimir Pulaski out of the military, And one more thing I got to say is conservatives are generally anti-science. And to think that homosexuality is just a lifestyle choice, or transgender is a lifestyle choice, or intersex, or whatever, it's not. It's nature, okay? And that's all I have to say.
Sally, thanks for the call. Here's that Washington Post story. My producer found it for you. A Revolutionary War hero who served alongside Washington may have been intersex, from the Washington Post from last week. Carlos is next. Active and retired members of the military. Go ahead, from Tampa, Florida.
Yes, I have no problem at all with transgender people. However, to me, the main objection is the tremendous cost of the transition. If it wasn't for that, and you continued with the don't ask, don't tell, where that's kind of disruptive, I wouldn't see a problem with it. But my main objection is the tremendous cost to the DOD. Thank you.
So, Carlos, before you go, you talk about the tremendous cost of the DoD. $8 million spent by the military on transgender care since 2016. So in the years since 2016, each year the military health budget exceeds some $50 billion. Your thoughts on those figures?
Well, I think they would just continue to go up, the cost for the operations. Other than that, I have no objection.
That's Carlos in Florida. A couple callers have mentioned the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. It's mentioned in his recent piece on this change by Mike Mullen, the former Joint Chief of Staff Chairman. He was Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff from 2007 to 2011. He writes in his piece in the Washington Post that I advocated and led our armed forces through the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, a policy that similarly forbade gay and lesbian troops from serving openly. Like Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the current ban presents itself as a neutral policy, imposing narrow restrictions on a segment of the LGBT population instead of what it is, a cudgel broadly targeting a defined characteristic of the population. Discriminating against a group of proven patriots is no way to appeal to the next generation of fighters and serves only to place politics above readiness. Mike Mullen, former Joint Chiefs of Staff chair, in his op-ed. Clyde is in Huntington, Texas, on that line for those who oppose this change. Go ahead.
Hi. Yes, I wanted to make a comment about the guy Fred that said that the Antichrist is going to be a homosexual. I've read the entire Bible. I'm a preacher, and the Bible does not say that the Antichrist is going to be a homosexual. It says that the Antichrist will not have the desire for women, but it does not say that the Antichrist will have the desire for men. I can assure you that Antichrist will hate the whole human race and will not have the desire except to take us all to hell.
So, Clyde, before we get into a discussion about the Antichrist, what about this policy?
Okay, I believe that if they serve honorably, that they should be able to be allowed, but I don't think that the government should be paying for their sex change operation. So if they want to get an operation, that's on them, but they should have to pay for it. I don't want my tax dollars being used to, pay for their operations. But yes, I think that they should be able to join if they serve honorably. They shouldn't be discriminated against, but they need to pay for their own surgery.
To Tom on that line for active and retired members of the military out in California. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, honestly, I think this is much ado about nothing that's blown up into a situation. The military is the military. My father was in the military. He tried to rejoin on December 8th in the Marine Corps. He was turned down because he had a bleeding ulcer. He tried to re-enlist in 41, 42, 43, 44, and 45. Their answer was, if we take you in, we have to maintain your medical care forever, and we won't do that. I think this may be an offspring. Gay and lesbian people, I have no problem. Transgender people, there's an additional expense. Let them join the Peace Corps. The whole thing is, I don't know how many people we're talking about. I don't even know why this is an issue. We're Americans. We do what we want to do. But if the military didn't want to do it, hey, the military doesn't want to do it, and I think that's fine. And by the way, thank you very much for bringing up the subject, because my dad would, till the day he died, he couldn't get in the military, and it really bothered him. So thank you very much.
Tom, what was his name?
My dad's name?
Yes, sir.
It was Sidney Perry Bates, and he had 8 years in the Marine Corps prior to World War II. My mother wouldn't marry him because he was a seagoing bellhop. She wanted him at home. And on December 7th, his battleship, the West Virginia, was sunk at Pearl Harbor. He didn't want to join the military. He had to join. He wanted to do something for his country more than anything, and because of his ulcer. He offered to carry garbage. He said, I'll do anything. They wouldn't do it. And the Army's the Army. It's the right way, the wrong way, and the Army way. So, and to me, this is a much ado about nothing. Gay and gender people, gay and lesbian people, who cares? Who cares what their sexual preference is?
Tom,
nobody.
Thanks for telling us about your dad. Appreciate the call from California this morning. a timeline from Axios in how this new policy came about and this change. They start back in June of 2016 when under President Barack Obama, former Defense Secretary Ash Carter lifted the Pentagon's ban on transgender people serving openly in the armed forces and saying that the Pentagon will cover medical costs for uniformed personnel who undergo gender-affirming transition. By October of that year, transgender troops were able to start formally changing their gender identification in the Pentagon's personnel system. Skip ahead to July of 2017. We showed you President Trump's tweets earlier in which he said that transgender people will not be allowed to serve in any capacity in the military. To August of 2017, the administration formalized that ban. The ACLU then sued the administration in a case called Stone v. Trump on behalf of 6 transgender members of the armed forces. That case and others worked their way through the courts to January of 2019. The Supreme Court let President Trump's transgender military ban proceed in a 5-4 vote earlier this year. And then here we are today. The final version of President Trump's transgender military ban went into effect yesterday. That timeline from Axios this morning. This is from a hearing in the Armed Services Committee in the House from March when members of the military, top Pentagon brass, were invited to talk about the Pentagon budget, but they were also asked about this new transgender policy. This is Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair Joe Dunford explaining how this policy was created.
So we did use the words physically, mentally, psychologically capable of being worldwide deployable without special accommodations. And then the Secretary engaged the leadership across the department, but that also included medical experts from across the department. And so what the Secretary did was, based on the definitions, and I think you were sensitive as well, Ranking Member Thornberry, that some of this is still in litigation. So what I'm trying to do is be as forthright now as I can be without getting into that issue. But the Secretary included the leadership and then medical experts. And so then, based on the definition of physically, mentally, psychologically capable of deploying, performing in their occupational fields, with the caveat without special accommodation, he proposed a revision to the 2017 policy. That was the process that was used to be able to do that.
Okay. Secretary Shanahan, you have anything you want to add?
No, I think the 2018 policy really just applies standards uniformly.
Yeah. I think there's a misunderstanding that the policy was changed on the whim of a tweet, and that's part of the reason I think it's helpful for members to know that there was a deeper, longer process that was involved that resulted in the Mattis policy. Now,
you saw at the end there, Mac Thornberry, the ranking Republican on the Armed Services Committee, asking about that issue as well. We want to hear from you this morning. It's just after 7:30 on the East Coast. We want to hear your thoughts on this new transgender troop policy. Went into effect yesterday. Getting your thoughts this morning on phone lines for those who support the change, 202-748-8000. Those who oppose the change, 202-748-8001. And setting aside a special line this morning for active and retired members of the military, 202-748-8002. Jim is on that last line. Claremore, Oklahoma. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'm glad that they're putting this through like this. There's standards and rates or jobs specifically for men and women. That's determined by birth, not by some surgery. We don't need openly mentally ill people serving in the military. You can't change your gender. There's no such thing as a transgender. The people definitely have something mentally wrong with them, which is fine. I don't think they should be locked away or anything like that, but they don't need to be serving in our military. The military is about defending our country, and we don't need to be giving free medical surgery for them because they want to do their little operations, and a man wants to be a woman or whatever. It's clearly something mentally wrong with someone doing that sort of thing.
Jim, from the Los Angeles Times, their story on this change, talking about the medical community weighing in on this. The Trump administration regulation that went into effect Friday bars transgender people from the military unless they correct, quote, deficiencies, a description that the American Medical Association said this week is unfair and defies science. The AMA told the Associated Press on Thursday that the policy and its wording mischaracterized transgender people as having a deficiency. It said it also objects to the Defense Department classifying the need to transition to another gender among, quote, administratively disqualifying conditions that include those that the Pentagon has labeled as congenital or developmental defects. More from the Los Angeles Times if you want to read that story from this week. To Dave in Virginia on that line for those who support this change. Go ahead.
Yeah, I remember during the Vietnam War when there was a draft and the body bags were coming back in the thousands and homosexuals were excused from going. I remember even hearing stories about guys going to the draft board wearing dresses to try to get out. But I don't remember any homosexuals complaining that they didn't have to go. So I think if a war were to break out, like Korean War, and the volunteer army wasn't enough and we had to go back to the draft, I don't think we'll be hearing anything about transgenders and homosexuals
Dave,
not serving in the military.
Do you think gay people served in the military in Vietnam and just didn't talk about it?
Not actively. I mean, if they want to enlist, and go, I don't have anything wrong with that. But if the military has a problem with openly homosexuals and they're causing problems, so they're not going to effectively be able to fight the wars we need to fight. They should be allowed to decide what's best and what needs to be done to win the war, and not gear everything to some kind of social experiments. That I think is a transgender thing. That we're spending $8 million for transgender sex change operations in the military. How does anyone not think that's kind of crazy? We got $21 trillion in debt, and we're spending money on stuff like that.
That's Dave in Virginia. This is Carol, Independence, Oregon. That line for those who oppose this change. Go ahead.
I don't see how anybody who was 4F unfit for military service should be able to be in chief over the military service.
Carol, do you think only those who have served in the military should be the President of the United States? Should that be a requirement?
Well, I don't think that if they're unfit for military service, how can they know what goes on in the military?
That's Carol in Oregon. This is Colin in Minnesota. That line for active and retired members of the military. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I think the fact that the military is banning transgender troops is kind of a sign that they're acknowledging the fact that these people do need some hormone therapy, or they may need some kind of treatment that they're not willing to pay for. I think they're acknowledging the struggles of transgender people all across the country. And another thing, I'm retired Marine Corps. I served in Afghanistan. As far as with respect to some of the other guys that have called in, I mean, when I was over there, I didn't really hear about who was gay or who wasn't or anything like that. It didn't really matter. I mean, the people to your left, your right, they kept you alive, and you kept them alive, and that's really all that mattered. So I just wanted to say that, and yeah, see ya.
Oh, thanks for the call. We'll stay on that line for active and retired members of the military. Vic is in California. Good morning. Vic, you with us? We'll try John on that line for active and retired members of the military. Mount Vernon, New Hampshire. Go ahead.
Am I on?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm a retired commander, Navy, and I was in during the Vietnam fiasco, and I'm here to tell you that transgender and homosexuals were considered a threat to good order and discipline in my time, and they still are. Chelsea Manning, case in point. They don't belong in the military because of those reasons. And It's time for this country to recognize that you can't legalize morality. You can use the law, just as the law was used to try to prevent homosexuals from doing their thing. But now, thanks to the Supreme Court, we have all kinds of problems in our society. And the military is no place to have sexual debates. And that's all I've got to say. We need to go back to the way it used to be in the 60s and the 70s and get rid of this nonsense. That's all I got to say, folks.
That's John in New Hampshire. This is Tony Perkins, the president of the Family Research Council, a frequent guest on this program. This is what he posted on his website yesterday as this new policy went into effect. Today is a banner day for any American who is committed both to the best interests of the military and the rule of law. After nearly 2 years of a judicial obstruction, President Trump's common sense policy on transgender service in the military has finally taken effect. The president fulfilled a campaign promise to stop using the military for social experiments. After careful study by a panel of experts in March 2018, Defense Secretary Mattis announced the detailed new policy and the substantial justification for it. In the end, the courts must uphold the commander-in-chief's power to make personnel policy for the armed forces. Tony Perkins, if you want to see it, it's frc.org is the Family Research Council website. As we hear from Tanya in Norfolk, Virginia, that line for those who oppose this change. Go ahead.
Everyone, I just feel like this is completely ridiculous. There isn't any reason to ban these people. You've been serving with, gay members in the military right next to you the whole time. You didn't notice it. There was no change. The only reason that everybody's talking about this so heavily, as far as I can tell this morning, is we're talking about the monetary aspect of having to do sex change operations for these individuals, either post their service or during their service. I don't think that should be a barrier to service. This is a voluntary force. And in case anybody stopped noticing, we're in 2 very active wars right now, more than that. Anybody that wants to serve, we need to be respecting them and welcoming them with open arms, because I work at the airport. When they drop these kids off every week or whatever to go and serve overseas, they're not corralling them into men, women, trans, gay, but they're not doing that. They're dropping off vans of your children, and everybody looks exactly the same. They're serving. Let the kids do their job. As long as they're out there defending me, defending this country, I'm all for it.
As we mentioned, the House Armed Services Committee invited transgender members of the military to testify at a hearing on this issue late last month. This is more from Captain Jennifer Pierce at that hearing.
I served as a company commander for 18 months, leading soldiers across the United States to train National Guard and Reserve units who are preparing to deploy overseas. I went to the field with my unit. I trained with my unit. We were out for extended time periods in the field, in the deserts of California and in the forests of Wisconsin. There were never any issues that arose due to being transgender. And between the time of the initial announcement of open service and then the tweets by the commander-in-chief, the fact that I was transgender never came up. It wasn't something that needed to be discussed, and it is only since this issue has arisen again that it has even been talked about in my unit. I can certainly understand the issues of readiness as a company commander. Readiness and morale were 2 of my primary concerns as a company commander, and what I can tell you is that no one cares about readiness more than a company commander. I will be the first person to kick out a transgender service member if they are not able to meet the standards, if they are unable to deploy, engage, and destroy the enemies of the United States. There should be absolutely no adjustment of standards, no different standards for trans people than anyone else in the military. All we are asking for is the opportunity to meet and be held to those exact same standards.
By the way, if you want to watch that hearing in its entirety, it's an Armed Services Committee hearing from earlier this year. You can find it on our website, cspan.org. You can just search Jennifer Peace, and her name will come up, and you'll be able to find that hearing. Robert's next in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. That line for active and retired members of the military. Go ahead.
Yes, I believe the only people that should have a vote on this should be the active military force. Those are the people that serve with them. I have served with gay personnel during my time of service, and I have no problem with it. If they're willing to put their life on the line and stand beside me and fight for me and fight for this country, they should be allowed to. There is one other thing that I think should have been changed years ago that has never been changed. It has actually nothing to do with this subject, but when you turn 18 years of age, like I did, you were supposed to sign up for selective service, and I opted just to go straight into the military, and I served in the United States Navy, and you have the right to vote at 18. You're supposed to be able to fight and defend your country, but these young people that go out there and put their lives on the line for this country are not even allowed to have a drink at 18 years of age. And I think that's wrong, because if they're willing to die for me and you, they should be allowed to do whatever they need to do. And thank you. That's my comments.
A few more comments from Twitter. Junior writing in as we're having this discussion this morning. If a person is able and willing to serve, why is this a discussion? If a person is willing to sacrifice their life for country, I have no issue. Jody saying 99% of Americans don't even serve in the military, but they have an opinion on who can die for them. Kelly is in Tampa, Florida. That line for those who oppose this change. Go ahead.
Hi there. How are you?
Doing well. Go ahead.
So this is the point. In my point, I'm 30 years old. I work very hard. I'm an entrepreneur. We're called the lazy generation as millennials, right? But as much as people have this opinion on us, what they need to have a clear opinion or a clear notion of, to know the fact that we as a generation of millennials, no matter what this vote is, we are not going to tolerate this to continue. So our country is very apparently trying to make us go against each other. They're trying to create havoc by all of this media, BS back and forth with Trump and his horrible things that he's saying about women, about just the sexism things that he's saying. We're not going to tolerate this. So even if this is something that is going through now, once the election comes around, it's not going to be the case, and it's not going to hold.
Kelly,
so they can.
What do you think? What do you think your generation thinks about this issue of transgender troops in the military? Does it matter?
That it's freaking disgusting. That the fact that they think that it's not okay to have someone who has passion for our country to serve, that wants to make my life better as a person who was blessed to be born of immigrants that came to this country from Italy. Like, if they want to protect me, I don't care what you have between your legs. I don't care what you think your gender is. I just care that you love my country. And because of that, I love you.
That's Kelly in Florida this morning. About 10 minutes left in this segment of the Washington Journal, having the discussion this morning about that new transgender policy that went into effect yesterday. A reminder about what it does. As of today, no one with gender dysphoria or who has transitioned from their birth gender will be allowed to enlist in the military. Current service members who have transitioned or began transitioning by April 12th, that's yesterday, will be allowed to stay in the service. Current service members diagnosed with gender dysphoria from today forward will have to serve in their birth gender, and this new policy allows service secretaries to waive this policy on a case-by-case basis. That explainer from the Associated Press. This is Ron from Kent, Washington. On that line for those active and retired members of the military, go ahead.
Well, good morning. Yes, I served over 22 years of active duty. My father-in-law, 32 years. And my son decided to have a sex transformation while on active duty. The problem with it is the simple fact that he focused more on the surgeries and the expenses that the government was going to pay for. And so his focus was on his sexual behavior and choices and not the mission that was before him. And he decided to do that because you got to go through voice changes, not only the changes between your legs, as it was said, but the behavior and activities. And it was taken away from his mission and his focus that he's supposed to be on. And the cost factor goes on from his active duty to when he gets out of the military. The government will continue to pay for it. And that is an expense that Americans do not need. We are mission-orientated in the Army, in the military, in the armed forces, and that's what we should focus on, not our sexual orientation.
Ron, what was the time frame for this, for the transition for your son-in-law?
Well, it was my son.
Your son, sorry.
He commenced doing this during the Iraqi war, and it continues to this day because he's now out. He just got out recently, and he continues to get his transformation through the VA. And that's an expense on us, and this continues on. It's taken away from the mission of the we put our uniform on for. And I don't believe it's right. And so, yeah, I support this this policy.
Ron, did you ever have that conversation with your son that you don't
Yes,
think
I did.
it's right? What did?
Oh, yeah.
How did that go?
No, I mean, we totally disagree entirely. My father-in-law disagreed. I disagree. We have served with troops who are homosexuals. Yeah, but their focus was not on their sexual orientation or their habits or behaviors. It was on the mission, and so yeah, he was more focused on, like I said, more focused on his sexual orientation and his activities than he was on his mission. So he was just taking advantage of the military is what he was doing.
And Ron, do you think the military's view on gay service members, the end of the "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" policy, encouraged him to have more of a focus on that issue rather than the mission?
The "Don't Ask, Don't Tell." I mean, I was in the recruiting command when that first came out. And it was difficult for the active duty troops to implement that, but we had no problem with it. But but when you started to express it to a point that that was your main focus, it became a problem with morale within the unit.
Ron, thanks for sharing your family story this morning. Mary Ann's next from Massachusetts. That line for those who oppose this change, go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My problem with this policy is I look at the so-called policy makers. They've never been in the military. And the way they disrespect women, to me, it sounds as if they're upset because if they wanted to disrespect somebody and all of a sudden realized, oops, not what I thought you were. And I know that sounds a little harsh, but I'm just going to try to keep it real here. Also,
so Mary Ann, on your first point, of it not coming from people who serve, the Pentagon developed this new transgender policy. It was something that was put out under the former Secretary of Defense, Gen Mattis, who obviously had a very long career in the military.
Well, no, I didn't mean to talk about them. I'm talking about, well, let's just be blunt. Trump and all the texts and that flavor of there's always somebody he has to go against. And there are too many people that I know who are gay, who are in the service. There are a few transgender friends that I have, and I myself am not gay. I have my family, but some of these people, friends, will jump in a lion cage to protect somebody. So you can't say there's a question of their dedication to serving their country. But if it wasn't about the transgenders, it would be about gays, because we did that a while back. There was always a fight about something. And the poor gentleman who said he wanted things to get back to the 60s and the whole 9 yards, well, people in the 60s were gay. They were just hidden. They were afraid to come out. And that's the saddest thing. We're not going to do that anymore. And we're not going to allow people to sit and say what religion, what color, what race, what gender can live and can serve. If you love your country, you have every right to get out there and defend it. And Donald Trump does not have that right to pass judgment the way he does, not the way he disrespects women. And No, I have not served, but family members have. My father has, my uncle. Many men in my family have served. Some have given their life. So I feel I can talk about this.
Marianne, thanks for the call from Massachusetts this morning. One more headline on this topic. This from the Hill newspaper this week. 2020 Democratic candidates condemn the Trump administration's transgender military policy. Here's a few tweets from recent days from a few of those 2020 candidates. Kirsten Gillibrand, a senator from New York, Democratic senator. Our troops deserve a commander-in-chief who fights for them as fiercely as they fight for this country. President Trump's transgender military ban taking effect today proves he fails that standard. As president, I will end this. This is Senator Cory Booker. The trans military ban must be defeated. To the thousands of transgender patriots serving in our country, we are so grateful for your service and will fight this ban with you. Make no mistake, an attack on the transgender community is an attack on all of us. And one more from Senator Kamala Harris. Her tweet from this week: the Trump administration's ban on transgender people serving in the military takes effect today. Make no mistake, this is discrimination and an affront to our values. Anyone willing to risk their life for this country should be welcomed and allowed to serve. By the way, we showed you Cory Booker's tweet, the senator from New Jersey officially kicking off his presidential campaign with a rally in his hometown of Newark today. You can watch that live at 1 p.m. Eastern. Here on C-SPAN. You can watch it online at cspan.org. You can listen to that announcement live on the free C-SPAN radio app. Back to your phone calls, just a few more minutes in this segment. Ted has been waiting on that line for active and retired members of the military. Ted from Texas, go ahead.
Good morning. I was just calling about the transgender issue there. And my comment on that is we should not be paying the bill for the transgender. I served during Desert Storm, and I remember the don't ask, don't tell policy. And I served with quite a few people that were probably gay and so on forth, but there was no issues with it. But nowadays, when we're going to foot the bill for all these medical changes and everything like that, that's going to be a problem, continuing problem, like another gentleman had said something about it. My thing is, if you want to join the military, if you're a male, you're a male. You stay a male. Whatever your personal life is, keep it personal. If you're a female, you're a female.
So Ted, one question on that standard.
Yes,
what if that person had transitioned before they decided they wanted to join the military? Should they be allowed to serve? Because under this new policy, they would have to serve in their birth gender.
If they had already gone through the expense of having this, the surgery and the transition done prior to joining the military, then whatever they're joining the military as, that's what they need to be. The thing is, during Desert Storm and that, we had a lot of people that went AWOL, male, female, whatever the case may be. We had a lot of people that went AWOL because they just joined the military for the college benefits. This is going to be the same issue. I just joined the military for my transgender surgeries and everything. I didn't join to go into combat. I didn't join for anything else. I just joined the military to have a sex change. And that's what we're going to be faced with, the medical ongoing costs of something like that.
And Ted, to be clear on the scenario that we set up, if somebody had gone through the surgery and done a full transition, they would actually not be allowed to serve under this new policy. If a current service member is diagnosed with gender dysphoria from today forward, they would have to serve in their birth gender, just to get that distinction clear as we talk about this new policy in effect today. Ann is in Greensboro, North Carolina. That line for those who oppose the policy. Go ahead.
Hi, yes, I don't oppose I oppose what is being done. I don't have a problem with transgender in the military. It makes no sense why we have a problem with transgender in the military. I'd like to ask the viewers, how many of you can I come into your house? How many of you would you like the government to come into could be? who you can be with, what you can do with your life. That doesn't make any sense. I understand the argument. It's the cost. The cost is high, and a lot of it should be put on those people that want to be transgender. If they want to change their gender, they should foot part of the bill for it. A part of it, should be in their military package. But for the most part, they should take care of that part themselves. But banning transgender in the military, that's retarded. That doesn't make any sense. If we're at war, if somebody is coming over to invade, if somebody is holding you at gunpoint, are you going to stop to say, hold on a second, are you transgender? Are you a man or a woman? Does it really matter if the person is male or female, or chooses to be male or female, for them to hold a gun? We have people running around here with mental disorders and mental issues, shooting up schools, shooting up playgrounds, and shooting up movie theaters, and we're crying about whether a transgender should be allowed to serve their country. That doesn't make any sense. What was the excuse that people used back when they didn't want blacks in the service? What was the excuse that they used? What was the excuse that they used when they didn't want women in the military? What was the excuse that they used when they didn't want gays in the military? When does this stop? When do we stop trying to infiltrate somebody else's life and tell them you have to be what I want you to be for you to do this service, for you to do this job?
That's Ann this morning, North Carolina. This is Glenn in Myersville, Maryland on that line. For those who support this change, go ahead.
Hi, how are you this morning?
Doing well.
I support the transgender. I just don't think we should pay for it. I think they should change before they join the military, and then it should be fine. You know what I mean? I support them for being transgender, but I don't support paying for them.
And one more call in this segment. Wendell in Jeffersonville, Georgia. That line for active and retired members of the military. Go ahead.
Yes, I support the president 100%. Common sense is what need to be in our country today. And I would like to ask the question. They saying anybody that wants to serve in the military should be able to support. So I ask this question. If I was blind and wanted to serve in the military and go into combat, should I be able to go in there? If I did not have any legs, love my country, and wanted to go in the military, would you all want me in the military and I couldn't walk? There's a whole lot of issues you can have and want to serve in the military. A person that have mental, very serious mental issues, and they could want to serve in the military. Should we let them serve in the military? Common sense is what President Trump have, and I thank God that he is our president. I support him 100%, and I thank God that he stopped the payment of monies to foreign countries to abort babies. And I'd just be glad when we stop killing our unborn babies. And it's a shame since 1973, that over 18 million, and I'm not prejudiced, so I'm black, I'm a black preacher, or just in the black community, there have been 18 million little black babies have been slaughtered in the mother's womb. And we have little 14, 15, and 16-year-old girls that don't have a mind to even know what life is all about. And they are killing each other. And I would like to ask this question. If the black community is completely wiped off the map because of abortion, would the white people be okay with that? With all the more black babies are aborted than any other race, and more black mothers at the age of 15 and 16.
Got your point, Wendell. Wendell, our last caller in this first segment of the Washington Journal. But stick around this morning.